Welcome to Fullmetalrpg. I'm your host. I'm not a host. I'm Richie Buzzkill. We killed the hosts. Just me left. Actually, this is season 4. Don't call it a comeback. Call it a retread. We're going to do some strip back stuff. We're going to come back to like 1, 2 people, 3 people on a show. Not a lot of extra production, just great conversations at the back of the RPG store. And I've got one of my oldest friends here with me tonight. I've known him since my first role-playing game. Noland. Welcome to the show, Noland.
Thank you, RBK. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Yes, he's a big supporter. He's a patron. I'm a patron still too. I want to keep this rolling. I believe you were in that West End Star Wars game that was my first role-playing game ever.
I think it was a Laconic Scout or something like that.
Yeah, I was, of course, I picked a Jedi for my first character because I'm a basic bitch. So, like...
all the way back then. But yeah, I think Paul has known you longer. He's been on the show.
Paul has known me longer.
I had to wait until you came to high school to meet you. So
right, but we lived in different towns and then came in the same high school. So
yeah, exactly. So I had to wait.
Yes,
but yes, we have known each other a good fucking long time now.
Yeah, we have. And we have played a lot of games, and there was a time period when I hadn't seen you for a long time because you went to college and you had made a whole new crop of friends that we all now Voltroned into a new crew that we play online on Saturday nights. So
that's true.
And that on the Saturday nights, we played a game, and I want to talk about this game. So that, might as well just get into Brindlewood Bay. Now, Brindlewood Bay, when you hear this description, it is probably the least metal description of all time, except until you hear the turn, because I think that's when you get into the more interesting things. So, Nolan, would you like to describe this game?
Sure, yeah. I am definitely the source of a bunch of weird shit RBK has played, like everything... you heard Brendan say, like, what are you playing? Something is wrong here, I think. The weird Twin Peaks thing with weird mirror, talking to yourself in a mirror, and all kinds of strange gaming experiences. I'm definitely into weird indie nonsense, but so this is another one of those problems where RBK has gotten caught up in my weirdness. But yes, so Brindlewood Bay is kind of an ensemble Murder, She Wrote with an occult twist to it. I don't know what the audience, but Murder, She Wrote was a TV series that ran from 1984 to 1996.
Ask your parents.
Ask your parents. Yeah, exactly.
But it could be many different other procedural TV mysteries, right?
Exactly.
That we're talking about. You could play X-Files with this. You could play Columbo. You could play any kind of procedural detective work, but this game in particular has the twist of it kind of points you to playing elderly women. Now, you could make any definition of women you want, but you could also allow for any elderly people going around putting their noses where they don't belong to solve mysteries. Now, it does a very different way than most role-playing games. Nolan, what kind of mechanics are we talking about here? How is this laid out?
You want me to jump straight to the big hook, or you want me to run through the mechanics in general?
Let's go general, and then we'll go to the big hook.
All right, great. So you play as Mermaid, members of the Murder Maidens book club. Like I said, they're elderly ladies. They're obsessed with the Gold Crown Mysteries by Robin Masterson, featuring the Gold Globe trotting super sleuth Amanda Delacour. and they use their expertise that they've gained from these books to solve real life mysteries. And they're famous in this little New England seaside town of Brindlewood Bay for solving these mysteries. And as they work through the mysteries, there's more and more hints about occult worshiping, a dark aspect of the goddess Persephone. So the basic structure of the game, it's a very kind of stripped down, powered by the apocalypse kind of thing. There's 6 stats and a small number of moves. Each character gets kind of a special move that makes them unique, and it shows how much the game loves 80s and 90s TV. All those special moves reference a particular 80s or 90s TV show. Yeah, and from there, they solve mysteries. And the big mechanical innovation is the mystery solving piece. So I, as the GM, hand out clues, and the players interpret them in terms of they literally tell me the answer to the mystery, like who killed this individual, right? How did the murder happen, and who done it? On my side of the screen, I don't have a correct answer to who done it. I leave that up to the players to put together a thing, and they have a move that they interact with at the end of the mechanical piece. They interact with at the end, where they put the clues together and they roll, and if they've put the clues together in a reasonable way, that's who did it. I've given them, number of suspects. Everybody in all the NPCs in the thing are very suspicious, and they'll pull those up and decide who did it. And so this kind of is looking in a certain way to like solve the same thing Gumshoe is doing, where Gumshoe says like you have to give the players the critical clues. They need to solve the mystery. But in Gumshoe, there is a right answer, right? Whereas in Brindlewood Bay, there isn't a right answer, and the players decide what the right answer is. So that's the big mechanical innovation that I think makes this game special. We can talk about some of the other.
I think that's a good summary. I think that idea of the mystery has no solution except for what the players are going to use these clues that they have collected, and we'll get into how you collect clues here in a minute because I have some thoughts about that. But I think that's kind of mind-blowing because it's sort of like and we had some stumbling blocks with this. There was some friction that kind of worked against this idea a little bit during play because we just finished a whole campaign of this, right? How many sessions were there? 12, 13?
10 or 11. I think the last one's numbered 10 actually. So, but
right. But you had a couple doubles.
Ran over, so
yeah, couple doubles and yeah,
there were a couple doubles, but yeah, there were 10 total mysteries. Yeah, and the game actually has. I was going to talk about this later, but now it's probably a good time since it came up. The game actually has a mechanism in it to conclude the campaign. Right, it has this arc, and it runs a nice, maybe 10 to 15 episode arc. And as the players find clues, they'll also find, in particular cases, what are called void clues. And each void clue kind of reveals more about the creepy conspiracy at the heart of Brindlewood Bay. But it also moves us along the track for what I'm revealing about the conspiracy and how the game's moving from kind of a cozy grandma's getting into trouble, being spunky and solving mysteries to more of a grandma is in like serious mortal peril from occult forces. Kind of the theme of the game transitions over the course of that arc, and when I reach a certain number of void clues that the players have collected as a group, then it triggers the final mystery, and they have to face the cult. And I personally loved that bit because I am, as RBK will know, historically bad at closing down campaigns.
Well, that's like everybody always says, oh man, you got to play a campaign of this. You got to play a campaign. And then we start so many campaigns and
Yeah.
so many of them do not work.
Yeah, but I have a goodly number of like, you know, 30, 40 session campaigns that just fizzled out.
There's
So,
there's reasons. There are many reasons like overreach. Anyway, but in this case, we actually did complete the campaign, right? We completed the campaign. I think what turns this, because the initial idea of these cozy grandmas, like solving mysteries, sounds a little, wallpaper and doilies. It doesn't. But when you add this idea that there's a dark conspiracy behind everything, and I think what also adds into this is the fact that, like, when you miss on a roll, you start marking boxes. It's not like you don't actually can't take damage. Like, there's no there's conditions, but there's no actual damage. But you can like corrupt your grandma.
Talk about the crowns?
Yeah, might as well talk about the crowns. So
yeah, so on the character sheet, when the characters are generated, you have a certain number of let's see here, it's like 7 crowns of the queen, which are just kind of aspects about your character as a woman and a mother, and like they're all reminiscences about that character's life. And there are crowns of the void, which are represent the character falling further and further into the clutches of the dark conspiracy. And all of these are basically get out of jail free cards. So there's no hit points or anything like that in this game. But every time you fail, I can tell you, what's at stake in this role is, your Maven's gonna get shot, right? She's gonna be killed, right? And even if you botch, you have on your character sheet these get out of jail free cards called the crowns, and you can only use them once per lifetime of the character. And as you start taking them off, they're expended. And yeah, it always just moves in the traditional Powered by the Apocalypse way. It moves complete miss up to a partial hit, or a partial hit up to a full hit. So anytime you're in a situation where you need to make a move to save your life, even if you miss, you can take one of these crowns, and that will bump you up to at least a partial success where you do save your life at some cost, right? So in the long term, these are kind of like permanent hit points. These are a death tracker for the character, right?
And because, what's even interesting about that is because, and these boxes aren't just boxes, okay? They say you are required to do a thing, right?
That's true.
It's not just like, oh, you took a damage. Like, you got to you then at some point, either right then or some point later, you have to tell a flashback of your fondest memory with your late partner, or a scene presenting a day showing how you satisfy your physical desires. Like, there's some like really interesting like and then you get it. That's the crown of the queen. That's relatively benign. Like, there's some cool stuff in there, but it's not like you're paying a real price, right?
And yeah, it is interesting that there's that like aspect of to save yourself, you do character development, right? Like, you don't have to build this character out super big up front, but like as you have to tap the crown of the queen, you're going to build out some of your character's background. Like right there, you're going to do a flashback later, and talk about a burgeoning romance in your character's life or something.
Yeah, or it go back to build your family out, make them more interesting, and I think there's a lot of mechanics in here that you could pull to use for other Powered by the Apocalypse. Like, I think that this game, spoiler alert, I think this game has some stuff that you could use to build your next generation PBTA or indie game in it. And then you start, like, once you get through those, or you can even just mark them as you want, there's these crowns of the void, where the void is like the conspiracy or the darkness behind it. You start marking those, then you start getting mechanical changes that also show that you have a deeper shadow in the world. And that's where you kind of get some more grit and some more interesting, like, shadows around the edges of the game, and that pushes the narrative a little further in that direction.
Yeah. The Crown of the Void, is definitely, as you tick those off, you're uh, kind of getting more occult powers and stuff that tempt you towards the thing, and like different, during more things would normally be kind of cozy, uh, cozy scenes kind of thing. You have to bring in dark elements about, how your character is a little bit, tainted by their dealings with with these occult forces. It's definitely bringing creepier aspects to your character. Yeah, as you tick those off, and those are ultimately uh, the final death counter, right? Like
Because
once you tick
you do them in
off all,
order. Those you do in the
yes,
order. The other you can do in any order you want. But those in
that's
order.
true.
And the last one is like, retire your character in a way that shows how they've been lost to the void, right? So that's the death mark for this. You can get
Right.
conditions that are like affect how you're rolling and how you're doing in the game, which we've seen in some other stuff like the Yellow King and some other things, which I think those are really cool. And then, like, to get experience points, they're trying to push you to play a grandma. So so there's like, dote on someone and like some other like gr- grandma elderly behaviors that they want to push, so you kind of mark those. And that, I really like that as a mechanic for pushing role playing of the actual characters and get experience points. So that's really quite nice. Sometimes it's a little difficult, but you can shoehorn most of them together. So
Yeah, I just wanted to jump back real quick to one thing you said a moment ago, that about this being kind of something you might build a next generation indie RPG thing on, and something that's probably of more interest to the audience than weird grandma mysteries, is Jason Cordova, who's the author of this, actually wrote Brindlewood Bay to solve a problem he was having in his new RPG, like The Between. I think it actually was released on drive-throughs during the time our campaign was running, uh, and that's uh, and that's a game about, along the similar lines, about monster hunters in Victorian era London. Kind of a little more.
a little more in genre for role playing. Like
Yeah,
this is like way off genre, even though it sort of makes sense once you think about it. But like, this is like, well, taking a characters you almost never see and putting them right front and center, which is very,
yeah. Very
Gauntlet,
I'm
very
always tempted by those off genre things, because like I've done fantasy a thousand
right.
times, and I'm like, oh, something freaking weird. I'm here for that. But I know not everybody is, right. Lots of people you know, like what they like, and but yeah, kind of, yeah, Penny Dreadful, From Hell, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen kind of thing would be the kind of pieces you would play in the between, and you know, but it's similar. But he was having trouble with the mystery aspect um, of the between, and he said, kind of like, well, let's put down all the like monster hunting and craziness, and let's just like, what would be a game that's just about mystery solving, and how can I like work out this mechanic for solving mysteries? Uh, and the game that came out of that is Brindlewood Bay, and he had to solve that first before he could finish the between. So
That's an interesting method. You don't often hear about that, or I mean, maybe people do that and don't talk about it. But like, I love that idea. But I like some of this stripped out. But I feel like when we can roll into the campaign you actually ran here. But like, it's sort of some of my thoughts about mechanics come from some of the things that we happened in the campaign, right? So
right, sure, of course. Yeah, it's your closest experience. Yeah. Well,
so we started in September, I think,
yep.
and we got rolling, and we had some ups and downs. You know, the whole holiday season, the whole absence of Full Metal RPG. We were not rolling outside of what that how any other table. But we had I think we built Steam, like it was
Yeah.
as we went. Now, when you running this, were you picking up different like pre-written mysteries and kind of like shuffling them together to make this? Is that what you were
Yeah,
doing?
that's exactly right. Yeah. The book comes with 4 or 5, and you can get an expansion with 4 or 5 more. And of course, itch.io is covered with people that have written a bunch of expansion to these. So yeah, I cobbled them together, and I did try and use the ones in the core book earlier, because the core book ones tend to be, uh, you know, more of that cozy mystery kind of aspect. Uh, Whereas, some of the later ones get weird. We had like a dark circus episode and a dollhouse. Like I tried to hold those creepier ones back for later. Was my strategy on that, because like I didn't want the tone to like follow that arc that is imagined in the rules.
Yeah, I think that was a good idea because that's like supposed to be the arc, right? Everybody's supposed to be getting closer to the void and closer to the the mystery. And I think the closer you get to a mystery like that, I think the darker the world kind of seems. Um, I think
But yeah, the just to talk about the GMing, like the for like you know something to just throw together and run on a Saturday afternoon. This game is fucking baller. Like the setup for a game is like 1.5, maybe 2 at the outset, like pages, and it's literally get here, you know, a list of uh, kind of a setup, an initial kind of like where does this mystery take place, what's basically going on, who's dead and what's the situation of their death, and then you get like one paragraph for each character, just kind of they're like this, and they're very kind of stock character like, a lot of things you can play kind of over the top. I think you had some like creepy guards at the doll museum and stuff that were like really just like over the top. And yeah, there are a lot of
when is
like,
a guard at a doll museum not going to be creepy? I mean, like that was
right,
sort of like, come on, like
yeah,
you got to be a
creepy
little
guards that like the
loose
dolls like a little too much. Yeah.
loose in the head a little bit to even build a doll museum, let alone guard a doll museum. So like, you know,
uh
I'm not.
Kind of like stock characters, and they're kind of a little over the top, which is like what you need for a like thing. And everybody's like super suspicious that they've all got like some reason that you could at least conceive of them murdering the victim, right? Some of them are more friendlier than others. Some of them like obviously have a lot more artifice to them, and they're like trying to be rich, formal people, and they're but everyone is like at least got something suspicious about them. So you all can pick literally anybody. Like you could pick the sheriff of the town, like he was a recurring NPC. And yeah, at any point you could have told me like, oh, actually, you know what, the sheriff did this, right? like, uh, uh,
We like to really take the screws to the sheriff. That was like half the fun, was just like just really telling the sheriff that he was a dumbass. Like that was like
Like,
in the most
what you
elegant
do
old
here
way.
with little old ladies are solving all your cases. What is it that you do here?
Yeah, what exactly is it you do here? Yeah. I found that like as a player, a lot of times with the characters, there were definitely characters. I think the group almost immediately went, "No, that's not the murderer," and that's sort of like maybe some of the like downside of this mechanic of there's no set solution is clearly the unexpected murderer. We did that a couple times, but a lot of times we're like, nah, it's not the nice little girl that found the body, like that clearly could have just murdered this guy. No, clearly it's like four people who were all in love with this one dude. Like
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I have a little bit of trouble with that my side because just in terms of talking about what else is on this little sheet is there's a list of like 20 random clues, right? Like let's see here. What is I think this one's yeah, this is about the circus or whatever, like just things you might find at the circus. Uh, Hastily written love letter, a threatening note with letters cut out of a magazine, flyers from a local animal rights group uh, protesting the animals in the circus, speckled with blood, safety override lever removed from one of the attractions, a shattered crystal ball. These kind of, just these are the like clues that I would hand out. Like people would search around or they'd ask someone, and I on my side I just get you know 20 of these things. Right, you probably only need 10 or 15 to solve the mystery. And from my side, there was a weird piece to that like there were definitely almost every time there were 2 to 3 clues that just really pointed at someone, one of the characters, right? Like, you know, there'd be, a suspicious environmentalist or something, and it would be like, oh, the land developer that's dead, like there's an environmental, you find like a, you know, environmental permit that he's like forged or something, right? I'm like, well, that just like directly points to the environmentalist as being the murderer, and like I as the GM don't want to give that clue. Fortunately, I've got like 20 of them, so I can like dodge them. But also, why is it in the mystery if it's so obvious that I basically can't use it, right?
yeah, and as a player, when you find a note, right? The natural, if you played another RPG, the natural the idea is like, well,
Mm.
what's the note say? But as the GM, you can't say that. You can't tell me what the
Yeah.
note says because that ruins the like.
Well,
It's colored like it tells you it's a love note, but like that we can do what we want at the end. This is one of the things that I find sort of frustrating as a player. I'm sure you found frustrating
yeah, I
as a
think
GM.
this is what we really yeah, this is the core of like where the gears grind in this thing. I think you've hit on it is like I need to give you with these very abstract clues and these characters and the situation, I need to give you enough background that you can form a hypothesis. Because if I'm just like, oh, there's a note and you can't read it, right? Uh, then you've got nothing. So often I have to say, who specifically, right? It says you find a threatening note with letters cut out of a magazine. I happen to know that, I put a message in there when we ran that circus game about that was a threatening note to the deceased, right? But it doesn't need to be, right? It could be a threatening.
Yeah, I mean, it could
So
be a note
I
from
have to take
anybody,
these. Yeah,
right?
like I didn't say who it's from, obviously, um, but I did at least give you, what specifically it was threatening. It's threatening his life, and who it was to, right? Because you need some more structure than what's given here. So I have to, ad lib, do some kind of improv stuff on the fly. Uh, when I pick which clue to give you, I need to give you a little more than oh, you guys find this clue and you'll decide what it is later. Because that, if I just do that, like the whole thing ends up feeling,
You just might as well give us points, right? You
yeah,
might as well just
exactly,
go, this is a clue point, like
right,
here.
exactly, right,
That's sort of the frustration comes with in some of this game is just like, okay, normally in a mystery you find something that is colored, right? This is something you really do find from what, real mystery cases, but like there's a as a as a game that's a little hard to really roll up into one thing, right? It's in such
yeah,
a limited space. You're like,
right.
well,
And it goes against every instinct. If you're playing Call of Cthulhu or whatever, like if you're used to playing Call of Cthulhu or any of those like mystery solving type games, like it goes against every instinct of your body to be like, I want to like take this piece of paper and have like fucking forensics guy like take it apart, and I want to know what the ink is and who the whatever, because you're thinking like there is a solution, right? Like I was always very willing to like at least give you like an initial like, okay, here's roughly what you see, and then people would ask for more, and I'd be like, okay, I tried to do this. I don't know if it was annoying to you or as a player or not, but I tried to say, okay, I can tell you what it is, but if I tell you more detail about this clue that it's specifically from this type of typewriter, or it's in this, or it's in a woman's handwriting or whatever, right? That's gonna then collapse your
it limits
set
our
of
possibilities of the solution as it
right,
would in the real world, but it doesn't. It would is this game is supposed to be this like freewheeling end game, but see what I found a little frustrating was even like talking in this game. Like you're supposed to, so you're like you're most of this is just like going about around interviewing people. Like occasionally you're like snooping around and you're finding stuff, but like you're supposed to just talk to these people. And I found it a little frustrating to be like have a conversation and then get like ask, well, are you meddling? Was like, because that's a move to say, you're
right.
meddling. I think
Yeah,
that was a
briefly,
little weird.
yeah, I agree. Briefly, like there's very few moves in this game. There's like two moves to deal with danger, depending on how dangerous thing is, and a move to look for a clue, as RBK just said. It's called meddling, the meddling move, which is just like where she wrote, little old ladies getting their business where it doesn't belong. There's a move to kind of connect with your fellow players and kind of heal some conditions. There's a big damn hero move about, you can guarantee yourself a success, but you can only use that one time per game. And there's kind of a move involving magic. And other than that, the only move is to solve the mystery. Um, so it's like very constrained. So you're either dealing with danger or you're looking for a clue. I think the looking for the clue, I don't know if the game imagines that it's a lot more. Um, there's a lot more snooping around and a lot less interviewing. I don't know. Um, but broadly speaking, you're supposed to be able to get these clues from interviewing people, from snooping around, from all kinds of things, right? Even from the occult powers, right? You ultimately, decide to use your uh, sensitivity as kind of the occult attribute on your character sheet. If you decide to use your sensitivity to do meddling, like you're basically kind of trying to divine a clue to the mystery, right? So any of your stats can be used. And, my kind of ruling on that was, if you're using your kind of presence, where your kind of interpersonal skill to interview someone, then yeah, you've triggered the meddling move, right? You
Yeah, and that's we will trigger the move, but it's like it's sort of funny this game is so light, but it's kind of mechanically crunchy in a way because you're constantly running into the mechanical wall
right,
of the game. Like you're like, okay, and I do a few things, and and this is PBTA, but like when you boil it down to so few things, I feel like it actually kind of constrains you a little bit more, which might some people might actually like more than this. So
I'll also say to what you just said, like you bump into the mechanics at a place you don't anticipate it. In a traditional like RPG, the last place you bump into the mechanics is like a discussion where you're interviewing the suspect, right? Or like talking with another character. Like that's in D&D or any of those things, that's not where the case where the mechanics trigger, the mechanics trigger in combat and you're used to kind of that kind of thing. I'm used to that kind of thing. But yeah, like uh, I always want to let you all have like kind of discussion with each of the suspects towards the top of the adventure, where you kind of at least get to meet most of the suspects. Uh, and at a certain point, you're like really kind of grilling them. So I'm like, oh, at this point, you're meddling, I guess. Roll meddling, right? Uh, and so yeah, all of a sudden, like you said, I've moved you out of your kind of oh, I was having a nice discussion with this NPC, and I was kind of whatever. And now all of a sudden, you've engaged the mechanics at a weird spot.
yeah, I almost think that it would be better not to diss what we were doing, but like just thinking about it later is like maybe you do the roll up front, because what I find satisfying about a conversation with a lot of NPCs is figuring out what they said, what part of what they said is a clue, right? In talking in a lot of World of Darkness stuff, you end up like you might do a social roll first or a social roll in the middle or
Yeah,
something like that, but you're what there's and then that's for the game master to kind of like point out that this section of it is the clue, right? Or whatever. And I think the putting the meddling at the end or running into it at that point, and that's a very PBTA thing, is like, oh, you describe a bunch of stuff and then, oh, so that means you're doing X, right? But in this
yeah,
case, I almost feel like you just need to go, okay, I'm making this move and then we're going to talk, right?
yeah.
It almost changes where you would normally run into the mechanics in PBTA.
That's a good point. Like I probably should have done it either at the beginning or the end instead of the middle. Right,
Yeah.
the middle's a weird spot, but
Well, it
uh,
almost became the end most of the time. Like when we hit
it's true.
metal, it was like, okay, conversation, meddling roll, clue dump, moving on. Like that happened quite a bit. Like that
Yeah,
was a pretty, and that was one of the things that sort of like, and we were really engaged. I was really engaged to the back half, but there was times when I was really having a hard time, like really keeping focused on what was going on. Sometimes some sessions, some early on in that, it's we play 5-6 hours online, so like
it's
we're
only four, but
it sometimes five, but most people, I think a good rule, and we ignore this rule intentionally, I think, is like 2 to 3 hours when you're online is like a lot.
yeah. Although most of our games also include an hour of BS, like
Most of it's BS, let's be frank, but like yeah, I think that there was like that because they're so light and because you're like, well, clearly we're going to end up here. It may,
yeah,
unlike a lot of PBTA moves where you shouldn't say, you should, it's good for the game master to never use the move name. The players often use the move name, but like maybe we just go, okay, I'm going to be meddling here. Let's roll the dice, and then we'll have our conversation, and then you drop the clue somewhere in that
right.
conversation.
Whereas I'm thinking in a little more like I take the criticism as constructive criticism is intended, but like I'm thinking my training from PBTA land is like when the character does something in the fiction that indicates to me that they've clearly triggered the move, I'm like, okay, now you're like really grilling the suspects, and now you've triggered meddling, right? like,
Right.
um,
and that's fair enough, and it
Yeah,
worked as kind of it eventually
I
worked as
think
kind of a punctuation point on the whole thing, so it works out.
right.
It's just one of those
I
things where like you're gonna
I
do
know.
one of three
I think you're
things.
right. I think it would have been better probably at the beginning or at the end. At the end is harder for me, right? Because on
Right,
my end, like I have to pick a clue from this list that they're going to reveal, or generate a new one on the fly.
right,
I have to generate something that definitely goes towards the murder at hand, but doesn't clearly, you know, exactly implicate one character. It kind of can throw suspicion on a character, but it doesn't like say like, obviously like this character was at the scene at the time. Like you can definitely pin them down, right? Uh, so I have to generate something like that on the fly, which is a little bit tough, right? So I'm kind of searching the clues, like, oh, and some of these clues are intended kind of probably more to be something the characters find. But then you interview a suspect, and the suspect says something about like, oh well, I found you know locket after the murder,
right.
you know,
Yeah,
and you didn't find it, but you learned about it from the suspect because I've you now turned something that was probably a meddling intended for uh, one of the mavens poking around, back in a back room where she shouldn't be, into
right.
something she's gotten by interrogating a suspect. And, maybe I should have pushed you all to poke around in back rooms more
Sure.
and do less interviewing,
And,
right?
and I think that like it all worked out. We all got through we got through the game, and I think it was very satisfying. The end game, the especially the last session, I think really everything came together nicely, and I think we all kind of like the end uh fighting the void, and we had a big ritual to fight, counter ritual, their ritual, and like summoned a god, and like we did all this like genre stuff at the end, and it really was very satisfying. But I'm going to ask you, would you ever run this again?
um, I think I would run something like this again. Probably not. I mean, I would uh, run something based on this system, simply because uh, the prep is so quick and easy. Like it's, you know, as far as gymming, this is like great. Like one page little thing. You don't have to read for hours ahead of time, and you can kind of just BS your way through it if you've got some experience as a GM. Uh, I'm kind of interested to hear that that the ending was best. I don't know what that is like because the book has a lot about prepping that final, not a lot, but a significant amount about prepping that final mystery. And I did a lot more maybe winging it and kind of just
Well,
throwing things
I think the
together
wing.
there than maybe I should have. But at the same time, I had 9 or 10 sessions of experience playing the game uh, to build on. So I'm not sure whether maybe you know me looking at these clues and kind of finding an appropriate one from the list was like slowing us down, and like I could have just completely BS clues
Well,
a
I
lot
think.
earlier and made it more satisfying. Like I don't know.
Well, I think part of it is that we're used to being freewheeling. Like realistically, we do a lot of freewheeling. Like, and I think we're used to your freewheeling. But I don't think that was it necessarily. Is that we all had kind of we had developed our characters to a certain point, and we knew
Yeah,
it was the end game, and we were into more territory than territory we're used to, where we're dealing with vampire mermaids and like rituals and
right.
like ley lines and like computer scientists developing silly things to develop ley lines. Like
Computer science, yes.
this is literally like the territory we live in. We lived in this in Eternal Lives. We lived in this in previous games we played, and the characters were already kind of worked out. and we were just like knocking off we were just like, no, this is gonna work. We're just not. I think we needed to be a little more freewheeling too. Like, I think our characters were not freewheeling enough.
Yeah.
We were not marking enough crowns.
Yeah, I actually was gonna talk about that later, but yeah, I also think the last two sessions there was a lot more engagement from everyone. I think you said that at certain points you dealt with some disengagement kind of early, of like getting what's going on and like, but knowing it was coming up on the end, I think like all the players were very much engaged, and I don't know what to think about that. I mean, sort of, you'd love to have everybody engaged all the time, but that's probably not uh, always realistic. Um, but I had some suspicion here about this that I wanted to ask you about. Like, how did you feel about uh, solving the mystery with no true solution? Because I honestly don't know how I would play that. Like, this is my question: is I don't know if I would play this game rather than if I would run it again. Is because like I can see it feeling like very much an empty victory. Like, oh, I made up some BS about the clues we found, and then I rolled 2d6, and I got a big enough number to get at least a partial success. Therefore, my solution is correct, and it just feels like I haven't solved a mystery. There's another part of my brain that kind of enjoys the fun of kind of using all the parts of the buffalo, where I would like, what is the most like what is the most parsimonious way I could like link all these clues together and describe the thing. So maybe I would enjoy it, or maybe I'd find it very hollow. So I don't know. I was wondering how you found like knowing in your
I,
knowing for certain that there was no answer. Uh,
okay,
how did you feel about it?
so I had every emotion about this end mechanic that you possibly could have. Okay, this was not like a constant like I hated it, I loved it, I was neutral on it. Like, I there was times when I was like, God damn it, the end of this is so crunchy and so like laborious. Like, we're going through all these clues and like giving an answer. It was like taking a test with everybody on online at the same time, right? Like, we're all like freewheeling an essay 10 essay questions together, right?
Right, because at the end, I'm supposed to, when you engage the kind of move about solving the mystery, I'm supposed to challenge you about like any clue that you don't like use or involve some way. I'm supposed to like not count that for you, right? Like, so you have to at least either say like, this is how it fits in, or this is how we explain it away. So I have to kind of a little bit challenge you, like, wait, does your theory make sense with this clue? Does it make sense with this clue? Right. And so I get what you're saying there. Absolutely. That like it feels like the GM will now give you a test on your clues.
And then there was the time that everybody but me decided the dog killed and was magical, and, and this magic dog was the homunculi, or the servant of this,
Or whatever, yeah.
yeah, whatever, of this ancient crone who was killing people. And I was like, no, do not do this. Please do not do this. This is terrible. But everybody, I think, as soon as I said that, went, no, we're full on ahead. Like, but I understand, but there's like, that's part of democracy. Democracy sucks sometimes, all right? Like, and then there's times when, let's be honest, I love to to appear to be clever. There's a reason I like being on a podcast and saying clever things, quote unquote clever things. I like to appear clever. There's when I can take a clue and say something magical, and all of a sudden all the pieces slam into place, and that's when I love it. Like, I had every emotion under the sun: annoyance, hatred, love, apathy. I had everything under the sun, all extremes, for this mechanic in the end of this game. And I'm not going to play it again, I don't think. This specific Brindlewood Bay, I don't think I've done this game. I don't need to play this again. And that's,
Yeah.
but I would play a different, like if you said tomorrow, because we both love X-Files because we're 90s kids, even though there's some problems, right? If you said tomorrow, we're 2 months from now, I'm doing an X-Files game based on the In-Between or the Brindlewood Bay, I would be right there. You know, because then there's a milieu that I'm even more familiar with. Like, I never watched Murder She Wrote. I never watched any of the. I just know these tropes from just like absorbing it from the monoculture, right? So like,
Right.
and I had a good time. I based my character on my grandmother. Like my character was my grandmother, and she was a big influence on me. And I really enjoyed bringing out some of those things. Like she would cheat at cards, and she loved to bake, and like, she'd have one beer, and all of a sudden you would be losing at every game. Like all of these things, I really enjoyed taking those memories of my grandmother and like using those to shape a character. Like, yes, it's weird, but I enjoyed it. But I think it's a great conversation about this game. Is there anything we didn't get to, Nolan, that you'd like to mention or talk about before we get into some business and go?
Uh, yeah, just got a couple things here. Um, I'm less sure about the way we paced the end of the campaign. Um, for the listeners, there's a mechanic in this when characters are looking for clues and they get critical hit 12 or higher on 2d6, they'll find a void clue, and that kind of paces the end of the campaign. And it was very uneven in certain ways, right? Relying on that kind of randomness to like pace the end of the campaign kind of resulted in
Felt like it
we'd
dragged a
have
little. It dragged out a little bit. Like I feel like we could have had a
yeah,
couple less sessions. I mean, I love the end sessions. I thought as
yeah,
they
I think
get
so too.
darker, but I feel like it this mechanic where you randomly gain these clues, and if your dice
Yeah,
are not hot, you're not gaining them. I
yeah,
feel
we
like
had some dry spells where it was just like they weren't coming, and then like we had like three or four in one session. Like it went crazy, and I was like, so it kind of went against this kind of more smooth transition between from the cozy to the creepy, right? Like, I was less sure about that, like relying on just dice, relying on characters rolling criticals to like trigger that. Like that can be very swingy and weird.
yeah,
Uh,
I feel like I would, because I what I suggested was using more like a, if you were playing this, using more of a Morkborg style where you preset out how many void clues you're going to give out,
right, right. The
and
more
that
quick thing where it ends the world, right? Yeah, I forgot
where it
about that.
ends the world, and you roll a die, and if it's like 1, 2, 3 or whatever, and 4, 5, 6, you give out a void clue, or just like every session, you just decide I'm going to give out a void clue, and I'm going to make this game 7 sessions long, right? Because that then you have a progressive linear,
Right.
or that really did. I feel like I think we all felt like it was dragging a little bit at some point because we were not getting weirdness. Like I think we're all a little
Right.
weird.
Exactly. Like it didn't move into the weirdness fast enough for us, and maybe that's just our desire for more weird genre stuff, less cozy stuff. But
I
yeah,
mean,
it
it
felt
got there in a reasonable amount of time. It
yeah, it
just,
wasn't like wildly out of whack, but it was a little bit longer than it needed to be, and it was swingy, which was weird. Um, so here, the other thing I wanted to talk about, just so there's this thing that I'm not sure I'm good at, and I want your opinion on it. Was I too nice? Should I have moved against the players? I mean, the characters harder as far as partial successes and even like misses. I tend to be like a fan of my my characters, maybe to my detriment. And I felt like at the end, most players had at least a few crowns remaining, and nobody had fallen into the dark conspiracy. So should I have been hitting you all harder?
I
Does that have
think,
made for a better story with more engagement?
yeah, I think that there is something to be said for that. I think probably initially, because you're mixing genres, right? In the Murder She Wrote genre, right? You don't really do a whole lot to the characters. Like the characters are pretty much Teflon. Like there's no real thing, right? But if you as you get into
Clowns are designed to represent is that like they can be captured by mobsters, but they'll always get away because they've always got a crown to
right,
take off. Right.
they might get tied up, right? They might get threatened with a gun, but they're not like you're not slitting throats here. This is not that kind of game.
Right.
And I feel like maybe there could be a little work done that could maybe help that ratchet up or change the way that that works, right? You could also say, okay, we're playing with less crowns of the queen, right? We're gonna play you only have 4 of those, right? Or whatever. Like reduce maybe there was too much resources. Like you were being nice and that, but also you should probably have been a little tougher, especially as we went along. And you were getting towards the end. You definitely were, but I feel like that should have been mid game, and then you pushed it a little harder even towards the end game.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote it down here, so I think you're dead on there. Push you all a little harder. That would have been good. But yeah, I think you're right, and particularly, it might have been also something to do with the number of characters, right? Because like the more characters you have, the more crowns are in play for people to get out of jail free too. So as they split up the getting into trouble amongst you all, you could kind of spread it out, and nobody uses too many crowns, right? So that might have been some of it too. But I think you're right. I think I need to push a little harder, and that's something I know about myself as a GM. So work on that. Another piece I wanted to talk about. There were 2 moves. And I think this is the last thing. 2 moves we didn't use a lot. The Gold Crown Mysteries move, which was the kind of I'm a big damn hero move, where the characters can guarantee themselves a critical success by saying that they found, they've taken inspiration from something they found in their favorite mystery novels. And this could only be used once per session by one character. There's only one total use per session of this move, but I think we used it 2, maybe 3 times, and I think it was twice in 10 or 12 sessions. So you guys had that resource on the table a lot. And the other one was the cozy move and the cozy item, particularly the cozy items, didn't get used a lot, which gave you advantage on certain things where you would roll 3d6, take the 2 highest as far as your PBTA roll, and that didn't happen a lot either. So from my side of the thing, like I can't make you trigger moves. So
sure.
Do you think these moves are not good? Do you think they felt cheap, or
First of all, I think the big damn hero move does feel a little cheap. Like if you're, I mean, I suppose if you're backed in the corner, but we were never. I mean, I guess this goes back to you being a little nice, but we never like. There's enough of us playing that we were never like backed into corner. There was never, no, everybody wasn't over a pit every time. We were, because we're used to PBTA. We all kind of had teams where like 2 people go here, 2 people go here, 1 person. Like it was all always split up. And if shit really hit the fan, we could have just forged in the dark our way into like being there for each other, right? This, yeah, somewhat go back to the Golden Girls. Like we could have been there for each other easily, right? This is and the cozy moves, the cozy items and moves and stuff. Like I was using my medical bag all the time as a clue finder, right?
Yes, you definitely were. Yeah,
but like because we weren't having a lot of like injuries or something or conditions where that were serious, didn't really have to use it as like an advantage maker, right? But I didn't have a whole lot of like I feel like the cozy stuff is very situational. The items are very situational. Like I could have used my Rolodex more. Like that's a thing I could have done all the time, but in some ways I feel like it's a a small town, like calling for outside help is sometimes a little out of genre. But like I just think that those are just the Golden Crown one is very situational, and um the the Golden Crown one is a little cheap, and the items are a little situational. So that's really why I think we didn't go there very much. But I think different groups would push that button all the time. Like I think that's a very much
Right.
a like so.
Yeah, I just saw it. I was like, well, if this guarantees you a critical. Like people didn't use it. Like that seemed interesting to me. That like people didn't push the button that guarantees them a critical. Right? Like
Well, we're used to putting ourselves in the worst situation. I mean, like when I'm playing an indie game, I'm putting myself in the worst situation possible and digging my way out. Like that's my fun in that particular instance. So if there's a move that just like automatically gets me out of trouble, like I mean, I did get the move where physically I could do something crazy, and like I only got that towards the end of the game. But like I think that's because I think it's funny. It's surprising that a little old lady can like throw a shoe and knock a gun out of a guy's hand or something like that. Like, I just think that's funny, but like, it's not, these are not things that need to be happening all the time. And maybe that's why, yeah, anyway. So,
and that answers my question.
yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any more things for me? I bet you
No,
got something
I
on.
think that I pretty much covered all my questions for this game. I mean, whether you'd play it, run it again, or whether you'd, you know, how you built this up. So I think,
Yeah, I think I would run it again, like I said, and I think it makes a good con game.
mm, that's an interesting subject probably for another day. But like how
Yeah.
you compress all of this into one game, right? I'm sure that they've got advice for that in the book, right? But to like go from cozy to dark within 3 to 4 hours, right?
Yeah, I don't know that I would try to go all the way, but I would try to, hit one of those more towards the middle that was like at least a little bit creepy, but
Right. Yeah, yeah. No,
uh,
I think you gotta get some genre in there for a con game. Like you can't
right,
just go
exactly.
full cozy.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. But I think, if you picked one of the more middling ones where there was definitely some creepy stuff going on, like you could uh, definitely run it as a con game, and I think people would get a feel for it because like a lot of people want to run indie games at a con, like just to get a taste of oh what would I like this, right? And I think you could definitely do that with Brindlewood.
Yes. So anyway, Noland,
Yes.
you're my oldest friends, one of my oldest friend, Paul. Shout out to Showalter. But I'm so glad to have you guys helping me push the boundaries, and you've been co-producing this show since before I was on it, so like
Okay.
because of all the weird games you bring to the table, so
I see.
I get to come talk about it. You help me bring content, so we're probably going to see you a couple more times this season, but
Happy to help.
I plan on bringing different guests to talk about different topics on every couple of weeks as the world allows. So, and those people that help us do that is our Patreon, our long suffering. At this point, I paused the Patreon a couple months. I forgot to pause it for February because I was sick with the COVID. Get your shots, people. And I did pretty well, but I'm feeling pretty good, and I'm back on the saddle again. Hopefully we can get some momentum here. And I'm going to probably pause it for March just to make up for one episode in February. So, but that doesn't mean you can't show support by signing in, and it always brightens my day whenever I see somebody has signed up for Patreon or given us a review or bought a t-shirt. Not that many people have really gotten to that, but we still have the t-shirts for sale. I still have this limited edition, beautiful, beautiful limited edition from Wolfmungus. The homie Wolfmungus did this beautiful Full Metal RPG t-shirt, and by the end of March, this is gone. This is gone at the end of March. I'm going to come up with something for season 4. If you're an artist, you want to work with me, I do pay. I'm not asking for free art. Come chat with me on Discord or email fullmetalrpgbiz@gmail.com. So, realistically, that's pretty much about it. Just, I'm glad for the help. I'm glad for my friends. I'm glad to be back. Thanks, Noland, for being on.
So everybody join the Patreon. Come to the secret Patreon channel where you see secret things.
I'm going to start putting the topic in the secret Patreon channel, and then you can spit questions at it. This one was a little impromptu. We didn't know if we were actually going to finish the campaign.
We're
pretty sure, but there was still
just last night that we finished the campaign.
Yeah, this is a fresh review. So, but really appreciate it. Come hang out. Discord's the best. Look at fullmetalrpg.com for a link to the Discord and all our other crazy shenanigans. So thank you very much. Good night, everybody. Rah!